Hi everybody, welcome back to Rocco Baby Crochet. Hope you've had a great week. So this week's free pattern, we've got these super cute little winter mitts for you. They've been named by one of the members of our group over on Facebook, Kerry Oaks. Thank you so much. So these are the Smitten mittens. So if you want to help me name my future patterns, then head on over to Facebook, because I always put a little sneaky peek on, and if I can't think of a name, then I will ask you to help me. I'd also really appreciate it if you could hit subscribe and the bell notification. Not only will it support this channel, it also means that you're not going to miss out on any of the free patterns that we release every Sunday. So what you're going to need to make your Smitten mittens, you're going to need two different colours of Aran yarn. I've gone for a dusty pink and white. The dusty pink, my colour A, you're going to need 80 grams of, and whichever colour you choose for your colour B, which is my white colour, you're going to need approximately 30 grams of. You'll also need two crochet hooks, a 4mm crochet hook and a 5mm crochet hook. Grab yourself a couple of stitch markers if you feel more confident using stitch markers, but other than that, all you will need is a darning needle and a pair of scissors. So let's get into making our Smitten mittens. So to make these mittens, we start at the cuff and work our way upwards. So you're going to want to grab your colour A, which for me is going to be this dusty pink, and you're also going to want to grab your 4mm crochet hook. So to begin, take your colour A and you're going to want to make a slip knot. Pop it on your hook, and we're going to begin with a foundation chain of 13. So you're going to yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. So we're going to crochet into the second chain from the hook. So as always, this that's on the hook doesn't count as a stitch, and what you're looking for is the V's that go down. Each one of those V's is a chain. So if we count backwards, that's one, and there's our second one. So you can, if you prefer, go in from the front and just insert your hook underneath that second chain, but I always work into the back loops or the back bumps of the stitches. So I turn mine over, and you're counting the lines that go down the centre of the stitches, and when you turn it to the side you can see them a little bit more clearly. I just count down 2 of those, and that's where I'll be placing my first stitch. So I insert my hook into that second chain, and we're just going to do a row of slip stitches. So you're going to yarn over and pull through, and then pull that loop through the loop that's in the back of your hook, and that's a slip stitch. So if you feel more confident, place a stitch marker here in your first slip stitch so you don't lose it, but we're just going to slip stitch all the way down. So insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up, and then pull it straight through. Move on to the third, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through, and then pull through again. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, and 2 left, 11, and my last one, 12. So for row 2, all we're going to do is chain 1 and turn, and so because these are slip stitches, the top of our stitch will be facing away from us, so you'll have to just rotate your work a little bit towards you, and we're just working into the back loops of these stitches. So let me show you your V here. It's this loop that we're working into, the one that's furthest away, this one here and here. So we're working all the way along into those back loops, and we're just going to repeat that row and just pop a slip stitch, back loop only, into every stitch across for a total of 12 stitches. This chain one here is just a turning chain, it's not going to count as a stitch. So you're just going to pop your hook into the centre of the stitch and push it underneath that back loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then just pull through. Moving into your second stitch, insert your hook into the centre of the stitch, push it underneath that back loop, yarn over and pull through again. Don't forget to pop a stitch marker in this first slip stitch that you've done. These can sometimes get lost in the turning chain, so especially if you're not quite as confident with your first and last stitches, stitch markers are going to really help you out with this pattern. So then I'm going to move on to my next one, and I'm going to pop my hook into the centre of the stitch, push underneath that back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull it through. And you should have 12 stitches to work into, and for the ribbing, each row your stitch count will remain at 12 for every row that we do. So I'll just work my way along to the end of here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, and here's my last one, so that's 12. So you're just going to repeat row 2 over and over, so you'll chain 1, turn, and then do another row of those back loop slip stitches, and you're going to repeat that up until row 56. Now I know a couple of you have mentioned about doing these in a smaller size. The length of your cuff, so your foundation chain at 13, you can alter that to any number that you want. So if you wanted a shorter cuff, you could perhaps do 9 or 10 as a foundation chain. The number of rows you want to keep as an even number. So if you do make this smaller, that's fine, the pattern will work up fine. It's just keep it to an even number of rows that you do. But for the ladies adult mittens which I'm making, you're going to just repeat row 2 up until row 56. So you're just going to insert your hook into the centre of the stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then pull through it again. Don't forget to replace your stitch markers if you're newer to crochet. Your stitch count will always remain at 12 if you're following along with my pattern. It's just I know there's a little girl called Millie who wants a pair of these mittens, so her mum may be doing these in a bit of a smaller size for her. But for the ladies adult, your stitch count will remain at 12 until you've done 56 rows of back loop only slip stitching. And when you get to that point, then if you come back to me and we'll work on making the hand of the mitten. I've just finished my 56 rows of ribbing, and I've chained one, and I've just pulled up a little bit of a loop here on this end just while I show you what we're doing next. So you should have your loose end that we began the foundation row with on the left hand side and at the bottom, and we're just going to fold it over and we're just going to slip stitch this together to make the cuff. So the way that we slip stitch it together, You've been used to using the back loop of the cuff, but what we're going to be using to slip stitch it together is the front loop of the stitch on the half that's closest towards you, and we're going to go through both loops of the stitch on the half which is furthest away from you, so this half. So let's have a look at where these stitches are for you. So looking at your stitch, you've got your 2 V's. This is the back loop which you've been working into throughout this pattern, and this is the front loop, so this is the one that we're going to be using to slip stitch it together. And then on the other half, on the other side of it, the top of your stitches will be pointing away, so they're along this side here. So you'll just want to turn your work towards you slightly, and you'll see the V's here. So you're going underneath both of the strands of yarn that make up the stitch. So there's my first one, there's my second one, and that's where I'm going to be slip stitching into to join these two together to make the cuff. So let's grab my hook, pop my hook just underneath that front loop only, grab the other side, and I'm just going to pop my hook underneath both of the loops on that very first stitch. Grab my yarn over and pull through, and then just pull through, and that's how we slip stitch it together. So moving on to my next stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook underneath the top of the front loop here, catching on to that, and then move on to my second stitch across on the other half and go underneath both of those loops, yarn over and pull through again. Moving on to my third one, so I go underneath the front loop, then onto underneath both of the strands of yarn that make the top of the stitch on the other side, yarn over, pull through, and I do that all the way along, and you should have in total 12 slip stitches going along, which join this cuff together. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I'll just work into this last stitch here, and then that's my 12 slip stitches done. So now we're going to move on to making the hand part of the mitten. So you're going to want to swap your hooks over, so you're going to want to take your 5mm hook now, and when we look at our ribbon, when you pull it apart, you can see that you've got stitches which pop out, and then the stitches that are below them here. So each of these are separate rows, so I call the ones that pop out the peaks, and the ones that are down below the valley rows. What we're going to do is we're going to do a row of UK double crochets. So if you use US terminology, then these are US single crochets. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop one double crochet into every valley stitch along. So you're going to want to begin by chaining one and then moving into this first valley stitch here. So just to the left of your chain one, insert your hook. So I carry across my loose end just to save me sewing in later. Yarn over, pull up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through both the loops. So you should have 28 of these valleys, so you'll be doing 28 UK double crochets. So you move into your next valley, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. Move into your next valley stitch, insert your hook underneath the top of it, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both the loops. and you just keep going around until you've put 1 UK double crochet in every valley stitch along, and in total you will have 28 double crochets. So if you want to press pause and come back to me when you're finishing up row 1 of the hand, and then we'll move on to creating the pattern together. So I'm just about to place my 28th double crochet, which is just here right before where we've seamed the mitten cuff together. So that's 28, and then you're going to slip stitch it to the very first double crochet that you made, which is here. So don't forget stitch markers if you want to mark your first stitch of these rounds, and you're just going to yarn over and slip stitch that on. Chain 1. Now you're going to want to grab your colour B. So for me that is the white. So I've grabbed my colour white, and the way that I lay it out when I do this, my balls of yarn, my colour A is I always keep my yarn on the left of me. My colour A is furthest away from me, and my colour B is closest to me. And the majority of this pattern is going to be worked using the herringbone half treble crochet. That's UK terminology. US terminology, that's a herringbone half double crochet. And the way that we work that stitch is we yarn over, insert our hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Now with a normal half treble you would just yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, but because we're doing a half herringbone, what we're going to do is we want to drop off this middle strand of yarn. So you just pop your hook down, drop off that middle one, and it leaves you with 2 loops on your hook. Now normally we're doing colour changes, but just normally, just to complete it, you would do that, yarn over and pull through the 2 that's left, and it leaves you with a really nice textured stitch, and your stitches pull slightly to the left. So I'll show you how we do it with a colour change. So you've got your chain 1, and you're going to yarn over and insert it into that very first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. I use my finger to push these stitches forwards because I find it a little bit easier. I pull on my working yarn just to tighten that up around my hook, drop off that middle stitch, and then I've got my 2 loops left on my hook. Drop my colour A to the back, and I pick up my colour B, which for me is white, and I'm just going to place that onto my hook, and I'm going to finish off that stitch in the white colour. So I'm just going to pull through and then hold the loose end to my white just with one of my fingers, my other hand just on the underneath, carrying the pink yarn over, and then I'll yarn over in the white, insert my hook into that next stitch, yarn over, pulling up a loop, so I'll have 3 loops, pop my finger behind those stitches, pull on my tension a little bit, slip off that middle loop, 2 loops, and then I'll drop my white yarn to the front. So if I always drop this pink to the back and the white to the front, then I never end up in any knots in my yarn. And then pick up the pink and finish off the stitch in pink. Yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch with the colour pink, yarn over, pull up a loop, drop off that middle stitch, drop the pink colour to the back, pick up the white, yarn over and finish off that stitch. Carry my pink underneath, yarn over in the white, insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, drop the middle strand of yarn off, drop my colour B to the front, picking up my colour A, yarn over and finish off that stitch. Carry the white over, yarn over in the pink, insert into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, drop the middle strand of yarn off, drop my pink working yarn to the back, pick up my white, yarn over and pull through to finish that stitch off. And we're just going to alternate that all the way around. Remember, always drop your colour B to the front, your colour A to the back, and then you'll never end up in a knot with your yarn. If you drop them both backwards or both forwards, you end up all tangled up and you're having to spend half your time getting the knots out of your yarn. So that's the way I found that's the easiest to keep everything untangled. So you're just going to work your way all the way around, alternating your herringbone half trebles in your colour A and B until you come to the end of this first round of the hand. And once you come into that point, so if you press pause now, and when you get to that point, come back to me and I'll show you how we move up to round 2. So I've just got this last stitch to work of round 2. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, and on the last stitch of each round you are not going to be making a colour change, so you're just going to drop that middle loop off, then yarn over and finish the stitch off. Then what we need to do is we need to join it to the first stitch of round 2 just to complete the round. Carry over your second colour, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop and pull that through. Then you're going to chain 1. The first colour of each round is always going to be the same as you finish the previous round, so you will do that on every row up, and we're just going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch, so where we've just slip stitched, yarn over, pull up a loop. Again, we're just going to drop off that middle loop of yarn, and then we're going to drop our colour B to the front and finish off the stitch in colour A. Then we're going to move on to the next stitch, insert our hook, yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, drop off the middle loop on the hook, pop our colour B to the back, picking up colour A, yarn over and finish off that stitch. Yarn over, move into the next stitch along, yarn over, pull up a loop, drop off the middle loop, drop your colour B to the front, pick up colour A, yarn over and finish off that stitch. Moving on to the next stitch, we do exactly the same, and you'll never be placing the same colour on top of the same colour. So if you're working into a pink stitch below, you should be using the white yarn or your colour B, and if you're working into a white one, it should be a pink one that you're working into it. So we're going to work this pattern all the way around. Remember that what colour you end the round in, you're going to begin your next round in, so that's the only stitch that you're not going to do a colour change in. And you're going to do that up until round 8. Round 9 is where we do the thumb, make the holes for the thumb. So if you want to go ahead and work this pattern up until row 8, and then we will do row 9 together, create the thumb holes. But it's a really simple pattern once you get going with it. Don't forget, just use your finger to pop that strand of yarn forward to drop it off your hook easier. That middle one, I just always pop my finger there, and it makes it much easier just to get your hook underneath it and slide it off. So I'll see you when you have completed row 8, and we will work row 9 together. Remember to keep dropping your yarn in the same direction to avoid getting yourself in any tangles. So if you want to hit pause now and come back to me when you've completed row 8. So I'm just placing my last stitch into row 8. So my last herringbone half treble crochet of row 8. And I'm going to slip stitch it to the first stitch just to join, just how we have done in all the other rows, and chain 1. So I'm going to be working a left-handed mitten, so that means that I will work my first 4 stitches normally, then I'll form the thumb hole, and then I'll have 18 stitches remaining to work how we have been doing throughout the rest of the pattern. If you're working a right-handed mitten, you're going to want to place your stitches as usual, as you have been doing throughout the rest of the pattern, in the first 18 stitches. Then you'll place the thumb hole, which I'll show you how to do in a second, and then you'll have 4 stitches left to work into. So let's work the left-handed one. So you're going to place herringbone half treble into the first 4 stitches with colour changes as usual. So my first one is in colour B, my second one in colour A. Drop off the middle loop, drop your yarn to the back, colour change, and then place your third one, colour change, and place your fourth one, drop off the middle loop, and then when you're finishing off the stitch just before you form your thumb hole, so for the left hand this is the 4th stitch, for the right hand this will be your 18th stitch, pick up both strands of yarn and pull through to finish off that stitch. Then you're going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and you're going to skip 6 stitches here down below. So we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you should be slip stitching back to your colour A, which for me is the pink. And where you slip stitch, because we're slip stitching into colour A, you're going to want to pick up colour B and just pop your stitch in there. So chain 1, just pull on that pink there just to tighten that up. Chain 1 as you normally would do, just to get a little bit of height, and back into the same stitch that you've just slip stitched in the opposite colour. So for me that's white, and place your half herringbone treble with a colour change, and then you'll just continue all the way around. Your stitch count will remain the same, so at the end of this, oops, I skipped one. So for the end of this row you should still have a stitch count of 28. Just make sure that you're always going into the opposite colour, because it can be a little bit fiddly here and get you in a little bit of a muddle. But if you just remember, into your white stitches you're always going to be placing a pink stitch, and into your pink you're always going to be placing a white, or whichever colours you have chosen. So if you work your way around row 9 and just finish that off, continuing the pattern as we have done throughout the rest of the mitten, and come back to me when you're about ready to start row 10, because we've got a hook change there, and I'll also show you how I work into my chains here. So if you hit pause now and come back to me when you're at that point. Okay, so I'm just placing my last herringbone half treble crochet of this round 9, and I'm not changing colour because it's my last stitch, and I'm just going to slip stitch to the first stitch just to join. Then I'm going to pop my hook out, and we're going to go down to the 4mm hook. So this just brings the top half of the mitten in slightly, so it's a bit more fitted on your hand, but we continue working the pattern in exactly the same way. So chain 1, back into that stitch, and we're placing a herringbone half treble, so drop off the middle. We're doing the colour change as usual, so drop the pink and pull through your white. Moving into your next stitch along and doing exactly the same, herringbone half treble with a colour change. So this is my third colour change, and then into my fourth, and then that will bring me to my chains that I created for the thumb hole. And all you want to do is work along them, so place one herringbone half treble crochet into each of the chains, so you'll have 6 chains, so 6 stitches going across here. So yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, drop off the middle loop exactly the same, and then we'll do our colour change. So that's 1, moving across into the next chain, 2, next chain for 3, colour change, move into the next chain for 4, drop off the middle loop and colour change, move into the next chain, and that's our 5th one, and you should have 1 chain left to work. Do our last colour change there, and there we have our last chain to work into. So I'll just insert my hook into that one and place a herringbone half treble and colour change as usual, and then your pattern should just continue nicely. So you should have your colour A on your hook, and your first stitch after the chain should be your colour B, so you're working in the opposite colour into the stitch as you have been doing throughout the rest of the pattern, and you just continue then to work all the way around. Your stitch count will stay the same, so you're placing 1 herringbone half treble with colour change in every stitch around for a total stitch count of 28, and you're going to repeat this up until row 20 when we'll make the top of our mitten. So if you want to continue making your mitten in the way that you have been doing, and then come back to me when you are finishing up row 20, and I'll show you how we do the top of the mitten and how we also add the thumb. So if you press pause now and come back to me when you're ready to do that. Okay, so I am coming up to my last couple of stitches of row 20. And on your last stitch of row 20, because this is the last round and the rest of your mitten is going to be worked in your colour A, the last stitch of row 20 is going to be in colour B. So we just do need to make a colour change one last time here to your colour A, so a little bit unusual compared to the rest of the rounds where we continued in the same colour. But then once you've made that colour change, you'll just slip stitch as usual to the first stitch of the round and chain 1. You can cut your colour B now, we've finished with that. So make sure you leave yourself enough of a loose end just to weave that in at the end. So for row 21, so we've chained 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry that loose end over just to save me having to sew it in at the end, and we're just going to place 1 UK double crochet in every stitch around, starting here where we started every other stitch. And again, your stitch count should remain at 28 at the end of this row. 2, 3. So you're inserting your hook, pulling up your yarn, 2 strands of yarn on your hook, yarn over and pull through both of those. So a UK double is the same as a US single, in case you don't use UK terminology. So if you want to press pause while you make your way all the way around for row 21, and then come back to me and we will do row 22 together. So I'm just at my last 2 stitches of row 21. And I'm going to slip stitch to this very first double crochet here to join the round and chain 1. So we're going to start decreasing our stitches now. So we're doing that. We're going to place 1 double crochet into this first stitch and 1 in the next 4 stitches, 2, 3 and 4, and then we're going to make a double crochet decrease. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So traditionally you'd go into your stitch underneath both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you'd go into the stitch next to it, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you'd have 3 loops on your hook and you'd pull all that through. But when you've got these stacked on top of one another, it doesn't look too bad at the moment where it's just there on its end. But if you work this around in the pattern, then it turns out looking bulkier than the other stitches. So I'll show you how I work my decreases, and they're practically invisible when you do it like this. So when you're ready to do your decrease, you insert your hook underneath just the front loop of your next stitch and then go underneath the front loop of the second stitch where you're making your decrease, yarn over and then pull up a loop, and you'll have 2 loops, yarn over and pull through both loops, and then that's invisible then when you work up the rest of your rows. So then you're going to go into your next stitch along and place a double crochet, and into the next 4 stitches, 2, 3, 4, so it's 5 in total. And then we're going to make our next decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook under the front loop of both of those stitches, yarn over, pulling up a loop, yarn over and pull through. So the next 5 stitches I'm going to do a double crochet in. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and in the next 2 stitches I'm going to make a decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook underneath that front loop of the first one and then underneath the front loop of the second one, yarn over, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops, and then 1 double crochet in the next 5 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and you should have 2 stitches left to work, and we're just going to pop a decrease into that. So pop your hook underneath the front loop of the first stitch and then the front loop of the second stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops, and then we're just going to slip stitch it to the top of the first stitch of the round just to close that off. So for round 23 we're going to start by chaining 1, and into the first 4 stitches we're going to place 1 double crochet. So 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we're going to make a decrease. So into the next 2 stitches we're going to do a double crochet decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook onto that front loop of the first stitch, then under the front loop of the second stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through both loops. Then in the next 4 stitches 1 double crochet, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then in the next 2 stitches along I'm going to make a decrease. So underneath the front loop of the first stitch, underneath the front loop of the second stitch, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through both loops, and then we're going to do 1 double crochet in the next 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we're going to make our third decrease. So underneath that front loop of the first stitch, underneath the front loop of the second stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both loops, and then 1 double crochet in the next 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then your final decrease in your last 2 stitches. So pop your hook underneath the front loop of that first one, then underneath the front loop of the second one, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through both loops, slip stitch to the top of your first double crochet just to join that round. So for round 24 we're decreasing again, so you're just going to chain 1, and into the first 3 stitches you're going to place a double crochet, 1, 2 and 3, and then you're going to make your decrease, then into the next 3 stitches you're going to place 1 double crochet, 1, 2 and 3, and then make another decrease, then into the next 3 stitches 1 double crochet, 1, 2 and 3, and then you'll make your decrease again, 1 double crochet into the next 3 stitches, 1, 2 and 3, and then your last 2 stitches will be your decrease. Slip stitch to the top of your very first double crochet just to join the round, and chain 1. So round 24, and this is the last round of the hand part. You're going to chain 1 and a double crochet in the first 2 stitches, then make a decrease into the next 2 stitches, 1 double crochet into your next 2 stitches, and then you're going to make a decrease, 1 double crochet into your next 2 stitches, and then make another decrease, 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and that should leave you with 2 stitches left, and you're just going to make one last decrease there. Slip stitch to the top of the first stitch just to join that round, chain 1, leave yourself enough of a loose end to sew the top of your mitten together and just to weave in, pull on that, chain 1, and just pull down on the knot just to secure it. So what we'll do is we'll turn the mitten inside out, and because this is a left-handed one, what you want to do is just line up your seam so that your thumb is that your seam is going down the side here on your left hand side, and attach that loose end to your darning needle. And all we're going to do is just whip stitch along here just to close the top of your mitten up, making sure that you go through the tops of all your stitches. and I like just to go along and then go back just to make sure that everything is nice and secure with the top of our mitten. And then I will just find a strand of yarn here along the back, and I'll just make a little knot in it. So pop your needle underneath a strand that's on the back. Make a little knot and hold on to the knot as you pull it, just so you don't change the shape of your mitten at all. And then I'll just weave that loose end in under 4 or 5 stitches back and forth, just making sure that I am only going underneath the back loops of the stitches, so it's not going to come out through the front of the work at all. Give it a little stretch and then go back, working under those same stitches that I've just gone under, and pull through. Give it a little stretch and then go underneath those stitches one last time. Again, giving it a little stretch. Take your darning needle off, and then you can just trim that loose end then. And then this is just the loose end from where I weaved in my white from earlier on. So then if you turn your mitten back right side out, and we will just attach the thumb. So you want to grab your colour A again. So for me, that is my pink. Now I use the 5mm here, and I just make a little slip knot and pop the yarn onto my hook. And if you remember that we skipped 6 and we chained 6 to make this thumb hole. So in each one of these stitches here, so you'll place 1 UK double, and in each one of these chains you'll also place 1 UK double, so you'll have 6 going along the bottom and 6 going along the top. So I tend to start where my first one is, so you can count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and I'll just insert my hook there. Slip stitch my yarn on and chain 1, and into that same stitch that I've just placed my slip stitch, I'll pop my first double crochet. So that's 1, and then move into my next one, 2, move into my next one for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and here's my last one for 12. So I've just carried around my loose end, and then I don't have to sew that in either. So I'll just pop that on the inside of my work so it's out of the way for now. And all you're going to do is slip stitch to the top of the first double crochet that you made, just to close that off. Chain 1. So then rounds 2 through to round 9 is identical. you're just going to place 1 double crochet in every stitch around. Your stitch count will remain at 12. So there's 4. So if you want to press pause now and come back to me when you're finishing up row 9, and I'll show you just how we finish off this thumb. So I'm just at the end of row 9, and I'm just going to slip stitch to this first stitch here just to close it, chain 1, and row 10, which is our last row, we are going to do a double crochet into this first stitch. Then into the second and the third stitch we're going to make a decrease, double crochet into the next stitch, then decrease into the next 2 stitches, double crochet into the next stitch, decrease into the next 2 stitches, double crochet into the next stitch, and you should have 2 stitches left to work one last decrease, and then slip stitch to the top of your very first double crochet, chain 1, snip your yarn off, pull up on that chain 1 and pull on it firmly just to secure that knot, and then we're just going to turn the thumb and the mitt inside out, and we're just going to seam together the top of that thumb in exactly the same way that we did with the top of the mitten. So we're just going to whip stitch across. So pop your loose end onto the top, pinch your stitches together and just whip stitch across the top of that thumb just to close the hole up. And again, just like with the top of the mitten, I just go across that back and forth. And then fasten it off with just a little knot here, just to secure it a little bit more. When you pull on that knot, make sure that you're holding on to it with your thumb so it doesn't pull all your yarn out. And then I will just weave in this loose end just exactly the same as what we did with the top of the mitten, just under 4 or 5 stitches back and forth. Give it a little stretch, and then you can snip off that loose end there and pop it right side out and just let it get into the right shape. And then all that's left to do is weave in these couple of loose ends here and here, and that's it. So I hope you've really enjoyed this pattern, and I hope you've enjoyed making your mittens. I think my sister is having this pair. Somebody always wants them. Please don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe and the bell notification so you don't miss out on next week's free pattern. So have fun and happy hooking. See you next week. Bye.